Our featured guest tonight is an incredibly intelligent and accomplished actor, playwright, novelist, and of course, comedian. Although he's probably more currently recognized for his work as a correspondent on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart and now Trevor Noah, his work has spanned decades, with memorable parts in Hannah and Her Sisters and as Anger in Pixar's Inside Out, and a number of other popular comedy specials. He's amassed a huge fan base. Here to chat about his life, career, and whatever is likely pissing him off right now is the ever so charming Lewis Black. Lewis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
So you've got a really interesting family history, and I feel like looking at your career, I maybe see some kind of themes and influences possibly from that. If I'm correct, your grandparents were Jewish immigrants from Russia, and their last name was not Black. What's the story there?
The name came, which I finally discovered. I did Finding Your Roots with my brain. I did Finding Your Roots and on PBS, and I hope he won't be watching this, so he can't be upset. But I can't. It's really, my brain has been. I'm still waiting for it to return after the 2 years of being out of commission, having to hide out from what was happening out there. But I learned that. But nobody could tell me that my family name, where it came from. Because people go, well, you must have been Schwartz. No, we weren't Schwartz. Because I'd ask them all of the basic questions I asked. What was Black in Russian? No, that wasn't it. It wasn't, there weren't people at Ellis Island going with a dictionary, going, oh, no, it turns out, according to Mr. Gates, that basically, when our families came over, from Europe, Jewish, Italian, whatever, Russian, Italian, Ukrainian, Lithuanian, all of them, that they would, basically the name would be a version of the name as it sounded. So they might Americanize the name. Mine was Black, B-L-E-E-C-H or B-L-E-C-H, Black, which is a horrifying. I never would be in comedy. I probably would have asthma and be wearing braces now. Black is it. So they changed it to Black, and whoever did that, I'd really like to thank them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because we did one of those things and we found out actually, I thought I was Italian, Dutch, and Polish, which made me think I would, I would always joke that I'd wear really tacky wooden shoes and I still wouldn't know what they were made of. And then I found out actually that I was part Jewish because apparently my grandmother had a fondness for her boss. And so we found this out like when my father was like in his 70s. Oh, and wow. So, yeah, so now I'm Italian and Jewish, so I don't know whether I should scratch my crotch or complain about the itch. How did your family find its way to the DC and Maryland area? Was that where they originally immigrated to? What made them put roots down there?
No, the family, the bulk of the family, both sides, mom and pop, went to New York, stayed in New York. My parents went, I'm not going to do this. We're not going to stay in the midst of this, family madness. And they made the decision, in part, and I've never really, I think, just as they described it, just to get some distance from the family. And it possibly because of Pop's job and Mom, that they got work in the Washington, initially Mom was working in Washington as a teacher, and Pop was working in the government down there as doing mechanical engineer design, and then so they moved out and stayed out, and it was really, they just did not want to deal with a lot of that family stuff, and both of them made the decision and moved away. So it was kind of like that they were the first generation, and they went, okay, we're going to go try to see what the rest of the world is like. See ya. And that was that.
Now, was anyone in your family particularly funny? I mean, where did your particular style or sense of humor originally come from?
My mother is really funny. My mother is really sarcastic, brutally so, much more so. My father had a real sense of where the joke should be. He had the idea of, he's the one who kind of would tell my mother, basically in so many ways, my father was like the audience who went, okay, no, you've gone too far. But my father was the one who introduced me. He was reading Catch-22 and laughing, and I was 13 or 14 or 12, and I said, you like that book? And he said, yeah. And I said, should I read it? He said, oh, yeah, absolutely. It'll tell you a lot about what you should know about living in this world. And
So,
and that really opened me to comedy, as my mother did, in terms of her sense of humor. Her sense of humor, to give you, even now at 103, she said, when I saw her a couple of times ago, she said to the caregiver that was there, my son just put me to sleep. I can't imagine what he does to an audience.
still got it, right?
Yeah,
So,
no. So it's always been that. So I had to basically be ready for battle.
what comedians did you have access to in your early years? I mean, was it things like watching TV like Carson and Carol Burnett, or did you guys have comedy albums? Where did those additional influences that helped you kind of start going down that path? And I know you did the playwright thing, and I want to talk about that in a
Yeah.
bit, but I was kind of curious as
Well,
to those types
the
of things.
comics were Ed Sullivan had on a comic every week, and so that kind of fascinated me. They were all kind of guys who up in worked around the country in the limited amount of clubs that were there, or they worked up in in the Catskills and the Borscht Belt, and so I studied that. I mean, I didn't really study them. I watched them because it fascinated me what they were doing. And then my parents had a copy of and went to see Nichols and May, and so they had a copy of their albums. They also had a copy. There was a guy named. This is something nobody will even know, but in New York City there was a kind of a review that a guy named Julius Monk put together, and a lot of the people who went on to write, who wrote TV and stuff and were performers on Carol Burnett and other places eventually, did these reviews, and my parents had those albums, so they had these kind of very funny bits on them, which are more sketches. And they went and saw they went and saw Lenny Bruce, and so they'd come back and talk to me about it. And so I got the George. Then when I could, I grabbed my friends and I grabbed George Carlin. We grabbed Shelley Berman, Bob Newhart, the Vaughn Meader, the First Family, all of that stuff. Anything that was Stan Freberg, who nobody really remembers. All of those guys kind of over time I either would listen. I would have the album, someone else would have the album.
And I, well, let me ask you this: when you went to college and you were going to study playwriting at UNC Chapel Hill, coming from a second generation immigrant family where everybody wants you to become a doctor or lawyer, did you have any conversation with your family? Were that something they were on board with, or did they have some other thing that they wanted you to kind of go down?
They were. My father was fine. My father was, whatever you want to do is fine by me. He also was the one who got me going to theater. So he started taking me to shows when I was 12, 13, and I was hooked. So when we go to New York, I would go to a show with him. And we had tickets to go see shows at the Shubert Theater so I saw Hello Dolly, the original. I saw, I think, My Fair Lady. I saw a bunch of shows that would come through town. And I was hooked on that stuff. So I kind of went down there with the idea that I was interested in studying theater. And my mother also thought it was crazy. I mean, because there was nothing in the background. I would audition for plays. I didn't get in them. I would do all sorts of things. I was not, but I was taking a drama course, and I loved reading plays. The whole thing fascinated me. I was intrigued by it. It was like, to me, theater was just this incredible other world where people went in, and between the audience and the actors, they created another reality. I thought, this is extraordinary.